Okay, so our next task is 16.4, class of restriction for CUCME, and we're told to configure class of restriction such that the following phones are able to make the following calls. Desmond Hume at branch 1 phone 1, which is a skinny phone with the DN of 3001, should be able to call national and below. John Locke at branch 2 phone 2, skinny, DN 3002, should be able to call international. James Ford at branch 2 phone 3, SIP phone, DN 3003, should be able to call local and below. Hugo Reyes at branch 2 phone 4, SIP phone, DN of 3004, should be able to call international. Also ensure that any future lines that may be added at a later time do not automatically inherit the CoRs, the class of restrictions, mentioned above. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is begin setting up our class of restrictions based on what we remember learning about a little bit ago today in the concept slides. So we need to set up, first of all, we need to go to the locksmith and we need to have him create keys and locks for us. Locks and keys, keys and locks, and we remember that they're the same thing. We do this with the command dial peer CoR for class of restriction custom. We're going to a custom made locksmith and he's going to give these locks and keys the name of, I only did LOK for lock or key in the slides just because I didn't have that much room to work with if I wanted my font size to be readable at all, which, don't know, maybe it wasn't. So we're going to create lock or key. Sometimes I call it lock key, but lock or key local. Actually, let's make them all caps. Okay, let's create lock or key dash national. The name of lock or key dash international. And that's it. Okay, if we remember when we look back at our first task, which had this chart, we were told that emergency calls anyone was allowed to make. Local calls, you had to have the class of restriction of local. So class of restriction for emergency was none. There was no class of restriction, or in other words, all were allowed to call. National was national, international was international. We didn't have anything about internal, or one person could call another specifically, or only certain people could call over to the corporate headquarters site. We didn't have any of that. So all we need are these three keys and lock combos. Okay, so we're done with the locksmith. Do show run, pipe to begin with dial dash peer. And we see that we've got our custom made locks and keys. Okay, now let's do dial peer CoR, but instead of custom, we're going to create a list. The custom was going to the locksmith. The list is actually where we go and create our doors to put the locks on, and also where we create our key rings to put the keys on. How do we know which is which? Well, keep in mind it's just an analogy to try to help you keep everything straight. You can call anything whatever you want, and that's what we do is we call them according to the analogy to try to remember things. So here we're going to create the custom CoR list. Sorry, not the custom. The custom was the locks and keys. But we're going to create the CoR list, and we're going to name it door local. So we just created a door, and guess what we're going to do? We're going to add a member, which is, you know what I should do? Do show run pipe to include, actually pipe to section for custom. Okay, so we're in our door, right? We're in the door for local, and we're going to give it a member of lock or key local. Now I'm going to only copy part of it and paste it to show you it does have to match. This says that this lock or key low is not defined, and that's true, it's not defined. So it has to be a member that has been defined in our CoR custom, and copying and pasting works really well for that. So we have one door called local, and we only put one lock called local on it. It's a lock when it's on a door. It's a key when it's on a key ring. Okay? So I don't have to actually hit exit. I'm just going to go create my door called national, and I'm going to put my member called lock or key national on it. Then I'm going to create my door called international, and I'm going to put my lock called international on it. All right, do show run, pipe to begin dial peer, so we can see everything we've created so far. So here's our keys and locks from the locksmith, and here's our 3 doors with their 3 locks on them. Okay, everyone good so far? So now we're going to go create we're still at dial peer CoR list, but instead of creating a door, now we're going to create our key ring, and the key ring is going to be local, where we put the member for local. We put the key of local on it. We're going to create the key ring for national, and national for the key. And then we're going to create the key ring for international. And actually, I messed up here. So hang on. I want you to try to show me what I did wrong. Okay? Someone pointed out to me. So I've got my locks and keys defined. I've got my doors. Each of my doors only have one lock on them. The door for local has the lock for local, the door for national, the key national, and the door international, the key for international. But my key rings also only have one key on them. Local only has local. That's probably fine. The key for national only has national, and the key for international only has international. And that's exactly correct. 2 people have pointed it out quickly, is that the key ring for national does not also have local, and the key ring for international, it only has one key. So if there's only one key, then it's not really much of a key ring, is it? There's no point in having a key ring. We do have to have one even if we only have one key. Okay, that's just the construct that we have to work in. But for international, we should also have national and local access. All right, so key ring for local has enough. Remember, we don't have to give it access to doors that don't have locks. So we're not going to put any door or lock on emergency or internal numbers. So we don't have to give this any subsets. We do, whoops, I accidentally switched over to another screen on accident. We do have to jump back into our national key ring and give it a member. It already has national. We need to give it a member for local. And then we need to jump into our international key ring and give it not only, whoops, not only the key for national, but also the key for local. Now we'll go back and do show run, pipe to begin with dial peer. We've got our locks and keys defined. Our doors only have one lock each. Our local key ring has the local key. Our national key ring has local and national. Our international has local, national, and international. So now we're ready to apply these class of restrictions to their appropriate places. And we were told that Desmond, which is ePhone 1, 3001, should have national. Skinny Phone 2, ePhone 2, John Locke, should have international. James Ford, which is SIP Phone 3003, but it's actually Voice Register Pool 1, is local. And Hugo Reyes, Voice Register Pool 2, is international. Okay? So everyone take a snapshot of that if you want. And also to ensure that any future lines do not automatically inherit the class of restrictions mentioned above. All right? So now let's do show run pipe to begin with telephony, just so that we can see our ePhone DNs here. Scroll up just a little bit. Our ePhone DN1 for 3001 and 2. In Skinny, we put these into ePhone DNs. So we do a class of restriction. We do a CoR list, and we say whether it's incoming or outgoing. This is going to be incoming because we're coming into the router from our phone. Okay, so it's going to be CoR list incoming, and then the name, and we were supposed to give this national access, so we're going to give it the key ring. Whoops, I'm not sure. Oh, I accidentally copied and pasted the wrong thing. So ePhone DN1 is supposed to have CoR list incoming keyring national. So we give key rings to the phones. ePhone DN2 has keyring international. Okay, do show run pipe to begin with voice register. Here's our register global. Here's our voice register DN1. But notice there is no CoR list. What about CoR? Nope. What about on voice register pool 1? Remember how we said some things with SIP are done on the device rather than on the DN. Is there any CoR? Yep, it's not called CoR list like it is on the ePhone DN, but there is something called CoR. It still is going to be incoming. And here we have to say the name. Okay, so I believe that, yep, James Ford, DN 3003, which voice register pool 1 has number 1 DN1, which if we scroll up, DN1 is number 3003, James Ford, so we're on the right one. Voice register pool 1 has CoR incoming. Copying and pasting the wrong thing. Voice register pool 1 has CoR incoming keyring local. However, there's not an enter. There is default, which means that it would take effect for all DNs, because remember, we're putting it on the device, not the individual DN like we did with Skinny, or a CoR list tag. Okay, so let's just give it a tag like 1. And then CoR list match number or lower bound number. Okay, what does this mean? How about like 3003, the DN? And then we can actually say enter or dash and then a high, an upper bound range. So like 3010. So what we can essentially say, do show run pipe 2 section voice register pool 1. Is we can essentially say that for all ePhone DNs that are applied to this voice register pool, we're going to have the CoR incoming key ring, just index number 1. We're going to put this key ring on all DNs if they match 3003 to 3010. Now, we didn't want to do that, and we certainly didn't want to do default because we were specifically told to ensure that any future lines do not automatically inherit the CoRs mentioned above. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this to just applying it to 3003. We'll look at this command again, and now it's only specifically CoR for 3003. Any other DNs won't have a CoR unless we add one later. Okay, we're going to just do the same thing for voice register pool 2. Except that that phone was supposed to have international. So we're going to do CoR incoming keyring international, tag 1, and the DN of, we were told, 3004. And now we'll do show run section voice register pool 1 and pool 2, and now they have their appropriate incoming CoR. Now, let's go ahead and write our router config and do debug ISDN Q931 and test if Desmond Hume at 3001 was only supposed to be able to dial national, and I go off hook and dial 000-1-206-501-5111 hash. It looks like it dialed out just fine. Desmond Hume. Why is that? Oh, because we never applied the outbound door. Remember, if I have a key ring, but there's no door, and so therefore no locks, then, well, I can walk right out of an opening just fine. So now we have to go back, do show run pipe to begin dial dash peer, or we could actually, you know what, let's do something different. Let's do show dial dash peer voice sum. Okay, so we've got our POTS dial peers up here. Notice the voice sum does show your 20,001 and 40,000 series dial peers, which are your skinny EFXS, so it has the voice port, and SIP doesn't have a voice port, but it does have the IP address and port. Well, 506 isn't the port, it's actually 5060, it just got cut off. But it has those system created dial peers, so even though they don't show up in a running config, they do show up with show voice register pool, show voice register pool or show voice register dial peer, or let's do show voice register dial peer. Okay, there's our two 40,000 ones, and do show telephony service dial peer. We have our two 20,000 ones. Okay, they also show up in the show dial peer voice sum. So 1 and 2 are emergencies. We don't have to apply anything there. 3, 4, and 5 are local, national, and international, respectively. So let's jump into dial peer voice 3. And in dial peer voice 3, we're going to apply our CoR list outgoing, because we're walking out the door, not key ring, but door for local. 4 is going to have national, and 5 is going to have, I should have left that, is going to have international. And notice it won't let me apply something that's not defined. Some places in iOS will. We'll do right. Now we'll try our call. Now remember, it matches the dial peer first. So we won't see any debug ISDN Q931 if the dial peer is matched but not allowed to send the call out. We will still do debug, let's just end out of here, debug VoIP dial peer. Clear the screen. We will see dial peer debugging. So I can go off hook from 3001, dial 000. Now, if I was dialing 0, 0, 0, actually 2 zeros, it hasn't matched anything yet, but 3 zeros is enough to go ahead and match the dial peer and result in ultimately not matching any dial peer because of the CoR. Okay, let's go from John Locke. So let's just make sure, yeah, he had international rights. So from John Locke, and I guess I could pull this up on screen. Oh no, sorry, John Locke is, yeah, John Locke is 3002 over here. Hang on. All right, it's blacked out. Let's try to tell it again. To control 3002. Okay, John Locke, 3002. So we're going to dial 0, 0, 0, 1, 206, 501, 5111, hash, and that does go out. Okay, can Desmond call national? 0010 704 7444. He can. That number goes out just fine. What about, we were given, as an example, James Ford, which is a SIP phone, dialing local only, so 3003. I can't see his phone, unfortunately, because I mentioned I can't control SIP. Let's undebug. Actually, let's just undebug VoIP dial peer. Leave ISDN. So from 3003, let's try to dial 000. Nope. Try to dial 00. Get reorder. What about dialing 0703 7333? Okay, so it's successfully limited 3003 to local calls. And then I believe Hugo was able to have international, so have him dial out. Hugo Reyes dial out internationally. No problem. And then just to prove the point of what we were saying earlier, let's go back into ePhone 1, which previously Desmond do show run pipe to section. It's actually ePhone DN1. ePhone DN1, and then let's look at ePhone 1 as well. I have to do 2 spaces here. Oops. All right. So ePhone DN1, Desmond, if I just take off that CoR list and do that show run again, now he doesn't have a CoR list. Can he dial? He was only able to dial national. Can he dial international? Sure sounds like he's going to be able to. Okay, so again, there was an outbound door of international, but when we take off the CoR list, when we take off the key ring, then there's unrestricted access. So no key ring or no door, unrestricted access. Put it back on. 000, we get the reorder tone.